Fleet Admiral Tivarn watched the void where Battle Group Solara should have been. Her command deck fell silent, not the theatrical silence of poorly written histories, the real kind. The kind that pressed against eardrums and made breathing feel like an admission of failure. "Run the scan again," she said. Lieutenant Maverick's claws clicked against the console. "Running, Admiral. No change. Thermals read empty. Mass detection reads empty. Quantum signature reads." He stopped. His third eyelid blinked sideways, a gesture Tivarn had learned to read as confusion that bordered on fear. "Reads what, Lieutenant?" "Reads as though Battle Group Solara never existed, ma'am." The words hung in the recycled air. 12 coalition vessels, 43,000 sentient beings, 8 species, 2 dreadnoughts, gone between one heartbeat and the next. Tivarn crossed the deck to the primary display. The star field showed nothing unusual, the same cold lights that had burned for millennia. But something had been here 37 minutes ago. Something had sent a routine status update, confirmed standard patrol parameters, and then nothing. "Communications," she said. "Broadcast on all coalition emergency channels. Priority 1. Commander Threll's antennae curled inward. "Admiral, we are outside standard relay range. Any response would take." "I know how far we are, Commander. Send the message." The words tasted like ritual, like something to do because doing nothing felt like surrender. She turned to face the bridge crew, 92 individuals from 12 species, all of them watching her, all of them waiting for an explanation she could not provide. 3 hours ago, Solara reported a contact at the edge of their detection range, unidentified, unregistered. They were moving to investigate when their signal terminated. She paused, letting the weight settle. Coalition Command believes this was a navigation error, a cascade failure. They have requested we continue our patrol and file a report upon return. Movement rippled through the crew, antennae twitched, scales shifted. The human members of her crew, all 6 of them, did something else entirely. They stopped moving, complete stillness, as if they had heard something in her words that the others missed. "Admiral," said human specialist Rennick, "what exactly did Solara report before they lost contact?" Tivarn pulled up the fragment. The transmission was clean, professional until the final second. Then the tactical officer, a seasoned Vel with 40 years of service, had spoken 6 words. "It's not a ship, it's a..." The transmission ended. Rennick's face changed. Humans were difficult to read. Their expressions moved too fast, shifted through micro-changes that most species couldn't track. But Tivarn had served with humans for 2 decades. She recognized what crossed Rennick's features now. "Recognition." "You know what that is," Tivarn said, not a question. Rennick looked at the other 5 humans on the deck. Some shared his expression. Others showed something worse, resignation. "Admiral," Rennick said, "with respect, we need to leave this sector. Now, full burn, maximum thrust." "Explain." The human's jaw tightened. That transmission cut off mid-word. The tactical officer was about to say it's a trap, but that's not right either. He swallowed. He was trying to say it's a hunter. And if one of those is here, then the thing that killed it is already tracking every signal we're sending. Tivarn's blood, cold as her species ran, dropped several degrees. "What thing?" Rennick turned back to the display. The star field reflected in his eyes. "The thing humanity has been running from for 300 years. The proximity alarm screamed. On the display, something unfolded from the dark between stars. Not a ship, not Tivarn's definition of one. It was geometry without meaning, mass without form, a shadow that consumed light and returned nothing. The last thing Tivarn saw before her fleet joined Solara was Rennick reaching for a device on his belt, a device she had never seen him carry before. Then everything went white. Then nothing. Tactical analyst Vex had watched the recordings 47 times. Not because she expected a different result, because she needed to understand how 43,000 beings could vanish without leaving a single atom behind. The Coalition Council chambers held 300 representatives from 21 species. Vex occupied a small station in the rear, a place for data, not voices. She preferred it that way. Voices lied. Numbers did not. "The First Fleet has concluded their investigation," said Council Leader Sorvin, her crest feathers flat against her skull. "The loss of Battle Group Solara and Battle Group Tellaris was the result of quantum instability in the Borium Passage. Navigational hazards. Unfortunate, but not unprecedented." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Vex keyed her microphone. "That conclusion is incorrect." The chamber went quiet. Every eye turned toward her station. Sorvin's feathers rose slightly, annoyance, not curiosity. "Analyst Vex," Sorvin said, "your expertise is appreciated, but the First Fleet's navigators have 300 years of combined experience. The First Fleet's navigators are working with incomplete data." Vex stood, her chassis unfolding to full height. She was Creel built for patience, for processing, for seeing patterns others missed. "I have analyzed both loss events across 312 variables. The quantum signature preceding each disappearance is identical. Navigation hazards do not produce identical signatures." She transferred her findings to the main display. 2 waveform patterns appeared, perfectly matched, same frequency, same duration, same decay rate. "The probability of 2 separate navigational hazards producing identical quantum signatures is approximately 1 in 9 trillion, Vex continued. "These were not accidents. These were attacks, the same weapon, the same origin point." Now the murmurs were different, sharp, uneasy. Sorvin's feathers flattened completely. "Attacks from whom? The only species with military capability in that region are the Dracori, and they signed the non-aggression accord 70 years ago." "The Dracori could not produce this signature," Vex said. "No known species could. I cross-referenced every energy weapon, every displacement device, every theoretical propulsion system in Coalition archives. Nothing matches." She paused, let the silence stretch. "Until I searched outside Coalition archives." The display changed. An old file, damaged, partially corrupted, marked with a classification code that had been retired 2 centuries ago. "During the expansion wars, humanity encountered something in the deep dark. They called it the Shroud. Their records are fragmented, but the descriptions match what we observed before Solara and Tellaris vanished." A human representative rose from her seat. Ambassador Solen, one of the few humans allowed in the council chambers. Her face was impossible to read, even for Vex's training. "The Shroud is a myth," Solen said quietly. "Ghost stories told to children during the war." "Your records say otherwise, Ambassador." Vex highlighted a section of the damaged file. Humanity's own tactical analysis classified the Shroud as a confirmed threat. They recommended full coalition mobilization. The chamber erupted. Voices overlapped. Accusations flew. Several representatives demanded to know why humanity had concealed this information. Others called for immediate military preparation. A few, the oldest species, the ones who remembered why humans were allowed into the coalition at all, went completely silent. Solen waited until the noise faded. Then she spoke again, and her voice carried something Vex had rarely heard from a human. "Fear." "The Shroud is not a myth," Solen admitted. "But it's not what you think either. It's not an enemy, it's not a species, it's a response." "To what?" Sorvin asked. Solen looked at Vex, then at the display showing those identical waveforms, then at the other humans scattered throughout the chamber, all of them wearing the same expression. "To something humanity woke up 300 years ago," Solen said, and we've been trying to put it back to sleep ever since." The chamber's lights flickered. Every human in the room reached for their belts simultaneously. And Vex finally understood why she had seen those identical waveforms in both attack patterns. They weren't attacks. They were footprints. And something was getting closer. The human vessel emerged from the wreckage field like a corpse rising from a grave. Coalition patrol craft had detected the distress signal 3 hours after the second vanishing. Standard procedure would have been to wait, confirm the source, verify no hostile presence. File paperwork while beings died. Commander Yarick ignored standard procedure. Now his salvage vessel, the Diligent, drifted at the edge of a debris field that stretched across 500,000 kilometers. Not debris from battle, debris from something else. Metal twisted into impossible geometries. Hull plating folded inside out. Systems that looked melted and frozen simultaneously. And in the center of it all, a human ship. The design was wrong. Not alien. Yarick had seen human vessels before. Blocky, efficient, ugly by most aesthetic standards. But this one was different. This one had been built with angles that hurt to look at. Surfaces that seemed to exist in multiple positions at once. "We're picking up one life sign," said sensor operator Pell. "Human, barely functional." "Boarding party," Yarick ordered. "Full environmental suits, no exceptions." He led the team himself. The airlock cycled open onto a corridor that made no architectural sense. Doors placed where walls should be. Gravity that shifted direction every few meters. Lights that flickered in frequencies beneath visible spectrum. They found the survivor in the command center. The room had been built for a crew of 42. Now it held one figure slumped against a display that still flickered with dying data. Human female, middle age by their standards. Burned scars covered the left side of her face and neck. Her right arm ended in a sealed cauterization point. She looked up when they entered. Her eyes took a moment to focus, then widened. "You're not human," she said. Her voice was a ruin. "How long has it been?" Yarick knelt beside her. 300 years since your ship departed Earth. That is the last record we have of this vessel's class." The human laughed. It turned into a coughing fit. Blood speckled her lips. "We didn't depart Earth," she whispered. "We left the colony. New Horizon, you probably don't have records of it. It's been dead for 290 years. Pell's breathing audibly quickened in his suit. 290 years. How are you still alive?" The human's eyes drifted to the display. The dying data showed something Yarick couldn't parse. Something large, something moving. "Stasis," she said. "Crawl, wake, fight, repeat." Her remaining hand twitched toward her belt. "How many fleets has it taken?" "What are you talking about?" "The Hunter." She said the words like a prayer, like a curse. "How many coalition fleets has it consumed while I was asleep?" Yarick felt his blood go cold. 2. Battle groups Solara and Tellaris. The human closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had changed behind them. Something that made Yarick want to step backward. "You're lucky," she said. "When it first started, it took entire sectors before anyone noticed. Now it's getting faster." She tried to sit up, failed. "Listen to me carefully. You have maybe 40 standard hours before it finds this system. It tracks quantum signatures. Every FTL jump, every communication relay, every active scan, it feels them like heat." Pell was already checking his sensors. "Commander, there are no hostile contacts within." "It doesn't show up on sensors until it's too late," the human interrupted. "You think you're seeing a shadow, a glitch, a malfunction. By the time you realize it's real, you're already inside it." Yarick stood. Inside what? The human's gaze dropped to the deck, to the twisted metal, to the impossible angles of her own ship. "Inside its hunting ground," she said. "The shroud isn't a weapon, it's not a species. It's a scar in reality that's been spreading for 300 years, And every time it consumes something, it learns, it adapts, it gets hungry for more. She looked up again, directly at Yarick. We tried to contain it, failed, tried to fight it, failed, tried to run. She gestured at her ruined ship. Failed. The only thing that ever slowed it down was making the cost too high, making every meal cost something the Shroud didn't want to pay. How? Yorick asked. The human smiled. It was not a comforting expression. By being more dangerous than anything it ever hunted before, she said. By becoming the thing that hunts hunters. The Diligent's proximity alarm screamed. On the main display, something that wasn't there began to take shape. Ambassador Solène had spent 40 years in coalition politics. She had negotiated treaties between species that evolved to eat each other. She had brokered peace in conflicts that spanned centuries. She had watched empires rise and fall from her seat in the council chambers. Nothing prepared her for the emergency session that followed Commander Yarick's transmission. The human survivor, Captain Myra Veals of the Lost Colony ship Last Argument, sat in the center of the chamber, supported by a medical frame. Her burns had been treated, but the damage went deeper than flesh. 300 years of stasis-interrupted warfare had left marks on her mind that no surgeon could reach. "She's lying," said Representative Thodan of the Dracori Federation. His mandibles clicked in agitation. 300 years. No species survives 300 years of active combat. This is a trick, a human trick to gain military advantage. Captain Veals turned her head. The movement cost her visible pain. "I have nothing to gain from your death, insect," she said quietly. "I've watched my entire species die by inches, my family, my planet, my reason for existing. If I wanted to trick you, I'd tell you the Shroud could be beaten. I'm telling you the truth instead." She pulled a data wafer from the medical frame's side pocket. "This contains every military record humanity compiled on the Shroud, every battle, every loss, every failed strategy, 300 years of running and fighting and dying." Solène took the wafer. Her fingers trembled slightly, a reaction she suppressed with decades of practice. "The Council will review these records," Sorvin said. "In the meantime, we will increase patrols along the—" "You don't have time for reviews," Veals interrupted. "The Shroud is tracking my ship's quantum signature. Every jump we made, every system we passed through, it followed. By now, it knows exactly where Coalition space begins. It knows exactly how many of you there are." She looked around the chamber, at the 300 representatives, at the guards stationed at every exit, at the weapons built into the walls. "And it knows you're not prepared," she finished. "Because no one is prepared for the first time. We weren't either." The chamber fell into chaos again. Solène watched it happen, watched species that had cooperated for centuries turn on each other in seconds. Accusations, blame, fear expressed as anger because anger felt like control. She waited. When the noise peaked, she stood, did not raise her voice, did not gesture for attention, simply stood and let her presence do the work. The chamber quieted. 40 years ago, Solène said, humanity applied for membership in the Galactic Coalition. I was the representative who opposed it. She paused. I said humans were too volatile, too aggressive, too dangerous to trust with Coalition resources. I said they would bring their wars to our door. She looked at Veals. The captain met her gaze without flinching. "I was right," Solène continued. "Humanity brought a war to our door, but not because they wanted to, because they had nowhere else to run." She turned to face the council. "We have two choices. We can turn our backs on the humans, hope the Shroud is satisfied with their extinction, and pray we are not next. Or we can accept that this war is already ours and fight like we mean to win." Thodan's mandibles clicked faster. "You're proposing we ally with a species that concealed an extinction-level threat for 3 centuries. "I'm proposing we survive," Solène said. The humans have been fighting the shroud longer than most species in this room have had spaceflight. They know its patterns, its weaknesses, its limits. She gestured to Veals. She's still alive. That means humanity learned something the shroud couldn't overcome. Veals spoke quietly. Humanity learned to make the shroud afraid. The chamber went still. Fear, Sorvin said. The shroud is capable of fear. Everything capable of learning is capable of fear, Veals replied. For 300 years we made the shroud pay for every system it took. Not with ships, not with weapons, with nightmares, with traps that broke its understanding of reality, with battles that scarred it the way it scarred us. She pushed herself upright in the medical frame. The effort made her tremble. We can teach you how to do the same, she said, but you have to decide now, because the shroud isn't waiting for you to be ready. It's already here. The lights flickered. Every human in the room reached for their belts. And on the main display, the outer patrol network began to go dark, one station at a time. The battle for the Borium Passage lasted 11 minutes. In that time, the shroud consumed 47 coalition vessels, 3 defense platforms, and approximately 80,000 beings. The survivors, all 212 of them, owed their lives to Captain Veals and the human tactics she had drilled into their command crews in less than a standard day. Tactical analyst Vex watched the engagement from the Diligent's secondary bridge. Commander Yarick had given her a station despite her lack of combat training. You see patterns, he had said. We need eyes that see what's coming. She saw it now. The shroud didn't attack randomly, it probed. Each assault was different. New angles, new frequencies, new ways to bypass shields and armor and reality itself. It was learning in real time, adapting faster than any biological mind could track. But the humans had known that. They're baiting it, Vex said aloud. Yarick turned from his command station. What? Look at the formation. Vex highlighted the surviving coalition vessels on her display. They're not trying to hold the passage. They're drawing the shroud into a specific trajectory, using the debris field as cover. On the main screen, the shroud's form shifted. It had no consistent shape. It flowed like liquid shadow, folding through dimensions that Vex's instruments couldn't properly measure. But it had mass. It had presence. And it was moving exactly where the human-designed formation was pushing it. Captain Veals's voice crackled over the tactical channel. All units prepare for burn. Delta pattern, 3-second duration. Delta pattern, Yarick said. That's not in any tactical manual. Vex pulled up the human data wafer, found the file. Read it twice before her mind accepted what she was seeing. Delta pattern is a trap, she said. The humans designed it 300 years ago, first time they ever damaged the shroud. What kind of damage? Vex looked at the numbers again, still didn't believe them. Reality displacement. The pattern doesn't attack the shroud, it attacks the space the shroud occupies, forces a dimensional shear, like tearing a hole in fabric and watching the threads pull apart. On the display, the coalition vessels moved, not in formation, in chaos, random vectors, erratic speeds, no pattern visible to any sensor. But Vex saw the pattern. She had been trained to see patterns, and this one was beautiful. The shroud pursued. It always pursued what it could not understand. That was its weakness, curiosity wrapped in hunger. It could not ignore something that moved outside its predictions. At the last possible moment, every human-controlled vessel fired simultaneously. Not weapons, beacons, quantum beacons tuned to frequencies that hurt to hear. The shroud's form convulsed, the first time Vex had seen it react with anything resembling pain. Then the beacons detonated. Space folded, not the controlled fold of FTL travel, violent compression. Dimensions stacked on top of each other like cards forced into too small a box. The shroud's mass was caught in the collapse, pulled in directions it had never evolved to exist. For 3 seconds, Vex saw through the shroud. She saw what lay beneath the shadow, what the hunter looked like without its camouflage. It was smaller than she expected, older, scarred in ways that suggested it had been hurt before many times by many things. Then the fold collapsed. The shroud vanished. Not destroyed, Vex could see quantum traces fleeing in every direction, but wounded, retreating. The channel erupted in cheers. Coalition crews celebrating their first victory, their first proof that the hunter could bleed. Captain Veals's voice cut through the noise. "Don't celebrate," she said. "You just showed it a new trick. It will remember, it will adapt, and next time it won't chase the bait." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, older. "The humans who designed that trap are all dead now. Every one of them died in the wars that followed, but they left something behind, a principle. The shroud learns, so do we. The only question is which side learns faster." Vex stared at her display, at the quantum traces fleeing into the dark. She saw something the others missed. The traces weren't random. They were converging, not toward the shroud's territory, toward something else, something deeper, something that had been waiting for 300 years. "Commander," Vex said, "the shroud isn't retreating, it's regrouping, and I think it's calling for reinforcements." On the display, the quantum traces multiplied. 300 years of running. 300 years of fighting. And now the galaxy understood why humanity had never asked for help. Because they were afraid of what would answer. The briefing room aboard the Diligent held 14 beings, 12 species, one captain, one survivor who had become something more than human. Captain Veal stood at the head of the table, unaided now, though her movements carried the stiffness of old wounds and older pain. The medical frame had been removed. She had insisted. "You want to know what humanity became," she said. "Watch." The display activated. 3 centuries of history compressed into 40 minutes of footage. Vex had compiled it from the human data wafer, had watched it twice already and still felt her chassis trembling. The early years showed hope. Colony ships spreading across the stars. Families, children, dreams of a future without the wars that had plagued Earth's past. Then the shroud came. The first attacks were slow, ships disappearing at the edges of explored space, colonies going silent, no patterns, no warnings, just absence spreading like a disease. Humanity responded the way humanity always had, not with fear, with fury, fleets mobilized, weapons designed, soldiers trained for battles they couldn't understand. The footage showed those battles. Vex watched them again with the others, saw coalition representatives flinch at images of human ships ramming the shroud's manifestations, saw crews venting atmosphere to freeze borders, saw commanders detonating their own vessels to deny the enemy any intact technology. "Brutal," whispered Representative Thodan. His mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. "Effective," Veals corrected, "for a while." The footage shifted. Decades passed in seconds. Human worlds fell. Human fleets retreated. The shroud learned faster than any biological mind, adapted to every weapon, every strategy, every sacrifice. And humanity changed. Not the change of evolution, the change of desperation. Human scientists began altering their own species, genetic modifications to process fear as tactical data, neural implants to share combat awareness across fleets, psychological conditioning to remove the instinct for self-preservation. "They rewired themselves," Solène whispered. Her hands gripped the table edge. "They became." "We became what we needed to become," Veals said. "Every limit we had, we removed. Every instinct that held us back, we burned out. We made ourselves into weapons because the shroud was eating our children." The footage showed the result. Human soldiers fighting without fear. Human pilots flying without hesitation. Human commanders sacrificing entire fleets without flinching. because the implants allowed them to feel the loss collectively, to share the grief so no one person broke under the weight. 300 years, Veals continued. 300 years of war. We lost 97% of our per-contact population, every colony except one, every fleet except the ones fighting at that exact moment. We became extinct 17 times, and every time the survivors rebuilt from nothing. She turned to face the display. The footage showed the final years, the humans who had been fighting since the beginning, centuries old, sustained by technology and willpower alone. Their faces were maps of grief. Their eyes were old in ways that had nothing to do with age. "We learned something in the last century," Veals said. "Something we should have learned at the start. The shroud isn't a predator. It's an immune response." The room went still. "Explain," Sorvin said. Veals pulled up a model. The shroud's quantum signature mapped against something else, something Vex recognized from ancient coalition records. The barrier between dimensions, the fundamental separation between reality and what lay beneath. "Something is bleeding through," Veals said. "From somewhere else, somewhere that shouldn't exist. The shroud is the universe's attempt to close the wound. It's not hunting us, it's cleaning us out, eliminating any species with enough quantum technology to widen the breach." "Then why does it attack?" Solin asked. "Why not just—" "Because it's not intelligent, not the way we understand. It's an automated response, a fever, and fevers don't care what they burn." Veals looked around the table, at the 14 beings who represented the last chance for coalition space. "We spent 300 years trying to kill the fever. Now we know better. The only way to survive is to close the wound, stop whatever is bleeding through." "And what is bleeding through?" Yarick asked. Veals's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went very, very still. "We don't know," she said. "We never got close enough to find out. Every time we tried, the shroud killed everything in the sector. Every time." She reached into her pocket, pulled out a device, small, old, covered in human script. "But we built this, a probe designed to reach the breach and seal it. We just never had a fleet strong enough to get it there." She placed the device on the table. "Now we do." The breach was older than any species in the coalition, older than the stars that orbited it, older than the concepts of light and dark that sentient minds used to understand the universe. It hung in the void between galaxies, a wound in reality that leaked something that should not exist. The shroud swarmed around it like cells around an infection, consuming everything that came within range of its quantum signatures. And now, for the first time in 300 years, something was coming to close it. The coalition fleet moved in formation, 1,200 vessels, 37 species, every ship that could carry a weapon or a shield or a hope. At the center, the human vessel Last Argument, repaired, refitted, carrying the probe that would end the war. Captain Veals stood on her command deck. Around her, a crew that had been born 3 centuries after her. Humans who had grown up on coalition worlds, who had never seen the shroud until it came for their adoptive homes. "You don't have to do this," Solin said. The ambassador had refused to leave the command deck. "The probe can be launched remotely." "No, it can't," Veals said. "The breach requires a live neural interface to seal, human neural interface. Something about our quantum signature matches the wound. We don't fully understand it, we just know it works." "Then send someone else, someone younger, someone who hasn't already given everything." Veals looked at the ambassador, at the fear in her eyes, fear not for herself, but for the being standing beside her. "I'm the last of the originals," Veals said quietly. "Everyone else who fought in the 1st century is dead. That means I'm the only one left who remembers what we were fighting for, before we became weapons, before we forgot how to be anything else." She turned back to the display. The shroud was already responding, forming barriers, launching attacks, doing everything in its power to protect the wound it had been created to guard. "The coalition fleet will draw its attention," Veals continued. "Give me 5 minutes to reach the breach, then launch the probe." "And you?" Veals smiled, not the predator's smile that had haunted her features in the briefing room, something softer, something almost peaceful. "I'll be sealing the wound from the inside," she said. "That's what the neural interface does. It convinces the shroud that the breach is closed, that the infection is gone, that the fever can break." "Is that true?" "No," Veals admitted, "but it's close enough." She turned to face her crew, the humans who had chosen to follow her into the dark. "All hands," she said. "This is the last battle, win it." The last argument moved. The coalition fleet engaged the shroud, not to destroy it, not to defeat it, just to hold its attention for 5 minutes. 1,200 ships versus an immune response that had consumed civilizations for millennia. They lasted 4 minutes and 37 seconds. In that time, Veals flew her ship through the heart of the shroud's defenses, not fighting, not running, moving with a purpose that transcended tactics. She had been doing this for 300 years. She knew the shroud's patterns better than it knew itself, knew where the gaps would be, where the attention would wander, where the hunter would look away for just a moment. The breach filled her forward view screen. It was beautiful. That was the worst part. The wound in reality glowed with colors that had no names, shifted through shapes that had no geometry. Something lived inside it, something that had been waiting for 300 years for someone to come close enough. Veals engaged the neural interface. The pain was immediate, complete. Every nerve in her body became a channel for the breach's voice. Not words, not concepts, but something older. Something that remembered when the universe was young and wounds like this could heal on their own. "Why?" The question echoed through her mind. Not hostile, curious. The shroud had never asked before, had never been capable of asking. But through the interface she could feel its confusion, its exhaustion, its desperate need to understand why these fragile creatures kept fighting. "Because you're hurting us," she thought back. "Because you're killing our children, because we don't know how to stop." "We are protecting." From what? The breach showed her. The wound wasn't a leak from another dimension, it was a door, and something was trying to open it from the other side. Something that would consume everything, not just life, not just matter, existence itself. The shroud was the lock, the immune response, the fever that burned everything near the door to prevent the door from opening. And humanity had been caught in the fire. "We didn't know," Veals thought. "We thought you were the enemy. You were a symptom. We tried to cure you. You would not be cured." Veals felt tears run down her face. 300 years of war, 300 years of death, 300 years of becoming monsters to fight monsters. And the monsters had just been trying to save them. "Can you close the door?" she asked. "We can contain it. We cannot close it. Only the one who opened it can close it." "Who opened it?" The shroud showed her. A human ship. The first colony vessel. The one that had jumped too far, too fast, pushing the limits of untested quantum drives. The one that had torn the first hole in reality. Her ship. The last argument. "You opened the wound 300 years ago," the shroud said. "Your engines, your arrogance, your hunger for more space, more time, more existence than you were meant to have." Veals closed her eyes. 300 years of running from something she had created. 300 years of fighting something that was trying to save her. "You could have told us," she whispered. "We tried, you could not hear, you could only fight." She opened her eyes, looked at the breach, at the door that her ancestors had opened. "Show me how to close it." The coalition fleet watched the last argument enter the breach. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the shroud began to change. Its form shifted, from predator to protector, from hunter to healer. The quantum signatures that had terrorized the galaxy for 3 centuries began to stabilize. The wounds that had consumed entire fleets began to close. And the last argument emerged. Not the same ship, something else. Something that had passed through the door and come back changed. Its hull gleamed with impossible colors. Its shape flowed like water, but its registry was clear. Its beacon was unmistakable. Captain Veal's voice came through every channel. The door is closed, the shroud is contained, the war is over. A pause. And I'm sorry for all of it, for what we did, for what we became, for what we made you become to survive us. The Coalition fleet didn't cheer, didn't celebrate. They simply drifted in the silence of space, watching the last human original guide her transformed vessel toward the home she had left 3 centuries ago. Ambassador Solin wiped tears from her eyes. "What happens now?" she asked. On the display, the shroud faded into the background radiation of the universe, still present, still watching, but no longer hunting. The wound in reality had been sealed. The fever had broken. And humanity, the species that had nearly destroyed everything by reaching too far, too fast, had become something else. Not saviors, not monsters. Just survivors. "We live," Veals replied. "We learn, we try not to make the same mistakes." She paused. "And maybe this time we succeed.